blueberry cobbler with cake mix is an easy and delicious dump cake.
This recipe has just 3 ingredients along with an optional one, so it's a great way to make a berry dessert for the 4th of July, a summer picnic, or even Christmas or Thanksgiving. For this recipe, you will need 2 21-ounce cans of blueberry pie filling, 1 15.25-ounce box of cake mix. I am using white. I recommend either white or yellow, but I'll get into options later on in the video. Along with 2 sticks of unsalted butter. I know that's a lot, but I'll talk about that a bit more later on. Like I said, there is an optional ingredient as well. I recommend adding 2 tablespoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice. If you watch my channel, you know that I add lemon juice to pretty much all of my berry cobblers and pies. Lemon helps to bring out berry flavors as well as just fruit flavors in general. So I highly recommend adding 2 tablespoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice, but it is not required. This is a dump cake because, just as the name says, all you have to do is open some cans and a box and literally just dump the ingredients into your baking dish. Here I have a 9 by 13 inch baking dish that is already greased. I took some of the butter from one of the sticks, maybe half of a tablespoon, and I just spread it around the bottom and sides. So the first thing I'm going to do is literally just dump the cans of blueberry pie filling into my greased 9 by 13 baking dish. And once the filling is in the pan, I'm going to spread it out. And once this is done, I will bring you back. Now that the 2 21-ounce cans of blueberry pie filling are now spread out into the dish, I'm going to take my lemon juice, my 2 tablespoons, and I'm going to sprinkle it over. I am using a half a teaspoon just to help me spread it evenly, because I think that if you just go like that, it's all going to end up in one section, and that is not what I want. If you want to, you could add maybe a little bit of cinnamon, somewhere between a 1/4 teaspoon and a half a teaspoon. You could also add the zest of 1 lemon, but honestly I think it's going to be fine just with 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I'm going to mix this in a little bit, smooth it out again, and then I'll bring you back. I finished mixing in the lemon juice, so now it's time to add the cake mix. Like I said, this is a blueberry dump cake, so instead of mixing the batter off to the side, all I have to do is sprinkle it over the top. Literally like this. Sprinkle it over the top as evenly as possible. Like I said, I am using a white cake mix. I recommend either white or yellow because those flavors are pretty neutral. But if you want to get creative, I think lemon cake mix would be good because lemon and berries go together very well. I think that strawberry cake mix would be interesting. I think even chocolate or spice cake mix would be interesting as well. So if you make this dump cake and you use a type of cake mix that's not white or yellow, let me know in the comment section what you think, because I'm very curious how it turns out. And now it's time to smooth out the cake mix as well. I'm going to take a spoon and just use it to glide over the top and smooth it out. Notice I am gliding over the top, moving laterally. I am not pressing down. You can press down a little bit here and there, but the goal is just to spread it over the top evenly, loosely, without packing it down. Do not want to pack it down. Spread it out like this. I just finished smoothing out the cake mix layer, And as I did that, I broke up the lumps without even trying. So now it's time to move on to the butter. I'm sure you noticed that I put the butter back into the refrigerator. That's because cold butter is much better for this step. As my oven is preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, I am going to cut it into little pieces and lay those pieces on top of the blueberry dump cake. To give you an idea of what I'm doing. There's my oven, like I said, 350. I'm going to take this knife and I'm going to cut the cold butter into very thin pieces, basically as thin as I possibly can. In each tablespoon, you'll probably get 3, maybe 4 of these very small pieces. So just like that. Very small, very thin. And once you make the pieces, take them and simply place them on top of the blueberry dump cake cobbler. You want to space them maybe a quarter of an inch or so apart. Your goal is to cover the top of the cobbler evenly. So you do want to put the butter close together, but not too close. Once I'm done, I'll show you what it looks like so that as you're making your dump cake at home, you can judge how far apart to put the butter. This is kind of tedious. This is probably the most, shall we say, difficult part of this recipe, but it goes pretty quickly. A subscriber suggested with my, I think it was the cherry cobbler that I made, I had a subscriber suggest freezing the butter and then grating it on a cheese grater and putting that over the top. I think you could do that as well. I have seen recipes online in which for dump cakes, people melted the butter and poured it over. That could work, but I think it would be harder to get it evenly distributed, because what's going to happen is that as the butter melts in the oven, it's going to both sink down and spread out, and it's going to turn the cake mix into a nice crumble. I'm almost done putting the butter on top of my blueberry dump cake. Here you can see that as I got farther to the right, I started putting the butter a little bit closer together. I think when I first started, I didn't put the butter quite as close together as I should have. So now I'm just going back. I am cutting some of these slices in half and trying to fill in the gaps. It's been a while since I've made a dump cake. That's probably why I was so cautious with the butter. And I'm actually not using all of it. I'm not using 2 tablespoons because honestly I think this is plenty of butter. But this just goes to show you that this blueberry dump cake is really easy. So if you realize that you put the butter too close together or too far apart, you can always adjust the butter. Here you can pick it up and move it around. This is a recipe that is very forgiving. So if you are a beginner cook, no problem. This is the cobbler for you. Now I'm going to put my dump cake into the oven at 350 Fahrenheit. My blueberry dump cake is now done. It was in at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, uncovered, for an hour and 5 minutes. But just baking it for 1 hour should be fine. I originally thought it was going to take maybe 10 to 15 minutes longer, but I checked on it because I could smell it, and I didn't want it to burn. A good tip is that if you can smell something, you might want to check on it because it's probably getting close to being done.
This looked and smelled incredible, so I couldn't wait to try it. And when I took the first bite, I knew that my blueberry cobbler with cake mix and pie filling was a great success. First of all, I really liked the combination of textures. The blueberry pie filling was smooth and silky, and the cake mix topping was nice and crispy. As the butter melted down and out across the top of the dump cake cobbler, it mixed with the cake mix and turned it into a crumble that was deliciously crunchy. In terms of flavor, I definitely thought that this was good, but with a caveat. Dump cake style cobblers are meant to be quick and easy, and this one was no exception because, as you saw, it came together with just a few ingredients in a few minutes. And even though it definitely did taste good and I could definitely taste the blueberry filling, it did not have as strong of a blueberry flavor as I would have liked. If you watch my channel, you know that I make a lot of fruit cobblers, and when I make cobblers, I make my own filling by combining fruit, usually frozen, with sugar, lemon juice, extracts, things like that. Although store-bought canned blueberry pie filling definitely does taste like blueberries, it does not compare to homemade blueberry filling. Like I said, this did taste like blueberries, but honestly, I felt like the dominant flavor was actually butter. That's not necessarily a bad thing because butter does make everything delicious, but if you're looking for a blueberry cobbler that has a really strong blueberry flavor, unfortunately, this isn't it. I have a recipe for blueberry cobbler here on my channel, and if you're looking for a cobbler with a really strong blueberry flavor, that's the recipe that you want. But if you want to stick with this blueberry cobbler with cake mix and pie filling recipe, I highly suggest that you do what I did and you add a little bit of lemon juice. Because just as I predicted, I felt like the lemon juice really brought out the blueberry flavor. I have seen some blueberry cobbler recipes here online with a little bit of cinnamon, and I know I mentioned adding a bit of cinnamon earlier in the video. You could do that if you want, but honestly, I think that since the blueberry flavor isn't quite as strong because I use store-bought canned blueberry pie filling instead of making homemade filling, adding cinnamon would probably lessen the blueberry flavor even more. One thing that might give this more blueberry flavor is instead of using 2 cans of pie filling, only use 1 can and replace the second can with fresh or thawed frozen fruit. I'm not sure exactly how much fresh or frozen blueberries you would need to use. I'd have to experiment with this a little bit to get the quantity right. But I think that it would be a good way to compromise between the ease of a dump cake and the flavor of a homemade cobbler. One thing that I did want to point out is that I don't know why, but for some reason I felt like the blueberry flavor was stronger when this was cold. So if you make this at home, that's something to keep in mind as well. I also wanted to touch on the type of cake mix. Like I said earlier, I recommend yellow or white because those flavors are neutral, but I think that experimenting with other flavors, especially a lemon cake mix, would be really interesting. Maybe even strawberry. So if you give that a try, let me know. Although this blueberry cobbler with cake mix and pie filling recipe was great on its own, adding some whipped cream, Cool Whip, or vanilla ice cream would be delicious as well. If you watch my channel, you know I'm going to tell you the truth. Some things are better than others. And I'm not going to give you a recipe that is legitimately bad. This blueberry dump cake cobbler is not bad. Most people would say that it's very delicious, but in terms of flavor, as a chef, I have to say that it's kind of lacking in fruit flavor. But that's not an issue with this recipe, it's an issue with dump cakes in general. But if you're looking for an easy recipe that's great for beginners and that is big enough to feed a crowd in a 9x13 inch pan, this is for you. If you give this a try, I know you'll like it. It would be perfect for the 4th of July, a summer picnic, barbecue, or even the holidays. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.